What's up, guys? Welcome to this YouTube channel. My name is Mary Mwaura. I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. In this channel, we discuss all matters law without any discrimination. So if these are matters that interest you, please stay tuned. Now, last time in the previous video, we discussed about the general principles for adoption, and now in this video, we shall be talking about the process as a whole. Now, the first step of adoption is that an adoptive parent ought to visit a registered adoption society. Now, adoption societies that have been registered are duly noted in the register, and so one can check it up, and you should ensure that the adoption society that you visit is registered in order for a proper adoption to take place. Now, the moment you go to an adoption society, you discuss with them, they get to assess you and to evaluate you, and they see whether you have qualified in the manner that we discussed in the previous video. And once they establish that you're qualified, they also assess the kind of child that is suitable for you, or in cases where you're already fostering a child or the child is your kin, they also evaluate and assess the child just to ensure that both of you are a match for adoption. Now, once that is done, the next step, they do a home visit. Now, they come to your house, they see the living conditions, and they establish these conditions within which this child should be able to stay. So if the environment is suitable for the best interest of a child, then you qualify to the next stage. Now, the other stage is that the child is placed under your care and control for a period of 3 months. Now, when they place the child under your care and control, they hope it is continuous until an adoption order is given. So what happens is that when 3 months lapses, then you're free to go to court and do an application for an adoption order. Now, it is important to note that the role of the adoption society is to give reports and recommendations, which will later on persuade the court to give an adoptive parent an adoption order. So once you move to court and file the application, the best thing about it is that it is done in chambers to preserve the privacy of both the adoptive parent and the child who is to be adopted. Now, the very first thing that court does is to appoint a guardian in the meantime while they are waiting. A guardian in the meantime before the order can be given. Because for an order to be given, court will look at some circumstances. And so in the meantime, so that just so not to interrupt with the child. Again, I said, in this country, the Children's Act, the children laws are always in the best interests of the child. So what they shall do, they shall appoint a guardian, and the role of this guardian shall be to safeguard the interest of this child, paying keen interest to the Children's Act 2022 and also to the orders that the court gives. Now, this guardian can be trusted to investigate and report to the court on the circumstances of the adoption. Then also, they come in handy because they can advise court on what other orders need to be given before the adoption order can come out. For instance, let's say it's an order of the child needs to be enrolled to a school, or the child needs health care. So they shall advise the court to give another order as they await for the adoption order. Now, the other thing is that the guardian also interferes in a case where consent is withdrawn. Part 1, we discussed about consent. Please note that consent can be withdrawn anytime before the adoption order comes out. So in a circumstances where consent is withdrawn, and now the guardian takes over over the care and control of this child. And also note that this guardian shall not be a member of an adoptive society that gave report for you to adopt that child. So they are an independent person. They act like an officer of the court to report to the court on the circumstances of this adoption. Now, once a guardian has been appointed, there are things that cannot be done. For instance, a parent guardian who gave their consent, they cannot remove the child from the care and control of the adoptive parent. Remember, we have said the child is placed under the care and control of a parent, and after a period of 3 months, that's when you apply to court. So if you had given consent, you cannot remove the child without the consent of court. So the other thing is that the adoptive parent cannot remove the child from Kenya before the adoption order comes out. And there are only rare circumstances under which the adoptive parent can remove the child from Kenya. The first one is with issues regarding to health of the child, the security of the child, or an instance where the parent or guardian has given express consent for the adoptive parent to be able to remove the child from Kenya, and also have given a welfare report agreeing to the child being removed from Kenya. Also, the court takes into account custody, maintenance issues, education issues, right before it can give the order. So it makes sure that this child is the normalcy that was in this child's life before adoption began is maintained. So please note that consents are very, very much important, and consents play a huge role in giving orders, these interim orders. For instance, you have seen you cannot remove a child from Kenya unless the parent has consented to that. So now let's go straight to saying what will court look at. Now, the courts are always given the mandate and the discretion to give orders or to withhold orders as long as they give the reasons. So courts in Kenya look at the following before they can give you an adoption order. One, they look at whether the consents have been properly given. What this means is that if this parent has given this consent, is it a proper consent? Have they given an unconditional consent while they intended to give a conditional one? So they look at issues such as that. Now, the second instance and the second circumstance that court will look at is the case in which money has exchanged hands for adoption to happen. This means that I have been given money and I am adopting this child because I have been given a token of adopting this child. Or maybe I am adopting this child after giving the parent a certain amount of money. Like, let's say that parent told me to give them 10 million so that they can give me this child. If courts come to discover that money exchanged hands, then you will not get the adoption order. The other thing they consider is that the parent or the guardian who are giving up the parental rights are understanding what this means, because you giving up your child for adoption means that you're giving away your parental rights to an extent that the birth certificate of that child, you shall not appear as the mother. Rather, the adoptive parent shall appear as the parent. I mean, you shall not appear as a parent in the birth certificate of that child. Then the other thing court considers is the best interest of the child. So they will look at, given the reports by the adoption society, are these conditions favorable for this child to be adopted? The other thing they look at is that in a situation where initially they had dispensed the consent, they shall reconsider, can this person now give consent, or are we still in the status quo of dispensing with their consent? There are relatives who maltreat orphaned children, and at the same time, they do not want these children to go into homes where they shall experience love. So they still check, Has this relative changed their mind to an extent that they can give consent now? And if they still cannot give the consent because they are withholding the consent unreasonably, they shall dispense with it altogether and go ahead and make an adoption order. Then the other issue that they shall look at is to ensure that the relatives of these children are aware that this child is being adopted. And it also gives priority to the relatives to see whether they want to adopt this child. And now when they establish that these relatives do not want to adopt this child, they go ahead and give the child to the parent who is desiring to adopt. Once court is satisfied that the factors that it looks at have been complied with, then it has no other option but to give you as the adoptive parent the adoption order. And in that adoption order, they direct that an entry being made in the adopted children register. So once you have this order, you take it to the registrar of children, who makes an entry in the register and also makes a certified copy for you. And now this certified copy is what you now use. Now from then you can even obtain the birth certificate of this child with your name, and now the child is yours and you're free to love this child and you're free to give them the care that you have always desired to. My personal opinion with regard to adoption is, first, be ready to be a parent, be ready to be it for the long haul, because what happens when you decide to adopt a child is that the parenting style is a little bit different because of the sensitivity and the background that this child is coming from. So you have to be more sensitive than usual because this child is now adapting to another environment that they were not used to. We have come to the end of the process of adoption. Thank you so much for sticking, and please subscribe to this channel. I shall continue to post matters law without any discrimination. So stay tuned, and thank you so much for watching me.